Chinese President Xi Jinping's diplomatic tour of Southeast Asia could easily be mistaken for a goodwill mission, but beneath the smiles and carefully curated soundbites lies a deeply strategic and unsettling recalibration of global trade alliances. While he delivers polished speeches calling for multilateral cooperation and free trade, the real aim is unmistakably opportunistic: to exploit the fractures caused by the Trump administration's chaotic reimposition of sweeping tariffs. China is not simply stepping into a vacuum. It is weaponizing the dysfunction of American foreign and economic policy to recast itself as the linchpin of a new trade order. The risks this poses, not just to the U.S., but to the broader global economy, are significant and growing more dangerous by the day. Xi stops in Vietnam, Malaysia, and soon Cambodia are no random itinerary. These are countries reeling from punishing tariffs: 46% on Vietnam, 24% on Malaysia, and 49% on Cambodia, suddenly imposed by an administration once again trying to reshape global commerce through raw economic coercion. These tariffs are not targeted surgical tools. They are bludgeons that destabilize entire economies, many of which are deeply tied to American import markets. In targeting Vietnam, one of the U.S.'s most significant trading partners and a country that has long served as an alternative to Chinese manufacturing, Trump has managed to undermine a critical pillar of the very decoupling strategy that Washington once promoted to reduce dependency on Beijing. This self-inflicted damage has given China an opening so wide it hardly needs to apply pressure. Xi is not winning countries over through charm alone. He's benefiting from Trump's alienation of long-standing allies and partners. What should alarm policymakers in Washington is not merely the diplomatic success of Xi's tour, but how eagerly these countries are now willing to engage with Beijing. They see a Chinese government presenting itself as stable, predictable, and cooperative, three things the U.S. has increasingly failed to embody in recent months. This charm offensive is also far more than surface-level public relations. China's attempt to court the European Union is already bearing fruit, with a tentative thaw in trade talks despite existing tensions. Even countries that remain wary of Beijing's politics are beginning to conclude that economic pragmatism may matter more than shared democratic values, especially when Washington itself appears erratic and hostile. The Trump administration's America First rhetoric is no longer just isolating the U.S. It is actively driving other nations toward China, not because they trust Beijing more, but because the alternative, dealing with an unpredictable and punitive United States, has become untenable. This shifting landscape is creating a dangerously unstable multipolar trade world. As more countries begin to view the U.S. not as a partner, but as a threat to their economic stability, their incentive to hedge or even realign grows stronger. And it's not just small or developing economies being swept into China's orbit. Even among America's traditional allies, like Japan and South Korea, there is a mounting sense of strategic confusion. These countries rely heavily on the U.S. for security guarantees, yet now find themselves the target of sweeping economic penalties that threaten their industries and employment. Their economic interdependence with China further complicates the situation. It is a trap, a geopolitical double-bind, and one that plays directly into Beijing's hands. China is also holding powerful financial leverage that is often overlooked in the tariff debate: its vast holdings of U.S. government debt. At over $700 billion, China remains one of the largest foreign holders of American Treasury securities. In a deeply indebted U.S. economy where deficit spending has become structural, this is no trivial matter. While a sudden sell-off would also harm China, even the implied threat serves as a potent geopolitical weapon. In a moment of heightened economic tension, it gives Beijing a card that can be played to sow further uncertainty in financial markets or pressure Washington in any future negotiation. What makes this entire scenario more concerning is the backdrop against which it's playing out. Global markets are still fragile from the aftershocks of the pandemic. War in Ukraine continues to destabilize Europe, and inflation remains a persistent issue in many Western economies. In this context, Trump's unpredictable and heavy-handed tariff measures seem less like strategic tools and more like reckless provocations. He has not only reignited trade hostilities with China, but has now extended that aggression to virtually every major trading partner. The result is a simultaneous alienation of allies and emboldening of adversaries. And while Xi's words on the importance of free trade and international rules may sound benign, it's worth remembering that China's trade practices remain riddled with contradictions. Behind the curtain of cooperation lies a regime that continues to subsidize industries, restrict foreign access to its markets, and impose harsh constraints on intellectual property. These are not the hallmarks of a free-trading democracy, but of an authoritarian system with strategic patience and a long-term vision. Western countries lulled by short-term economic relief risk trading immediate stability for long-term vulnerability. At the heart of this escalating realignment is a hard truth. Trade wars rarely have clear winners, but they always produce collateral damage. Workers in American industries reliant on global inputs, exporters facing retaliatory tariffs, and consumers encountering rising prices are all casualties of these tit-for-tat economic battles. Meanwhile, the strategic void left by an erratic U.S. leadership is rapidly being filled by a China that is willing, if not entirely trustworthy, to offer consistency and partnership, however conditional those terms may ultimately be. If left unchecked, the current trajectory could culminate in a global trade system fragmented along ideological and economic lines, with countries forced to choose between two power blocs, neither of which offers a truly equitable or sustainable model. Xi Jinping's charm offensive may seem diplomatic, but it is also a declaration. The rules of global trade are being rewritten, and China intends to hold the pen. The longer Washington flails under the weight of its own contradictions, the closer that vision comes to reality, and the more difficult it becomes to reverse.